Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help ambitious private practitioners across the globe to brand themselves and grow their dream practices. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building ninja tips. Visit privatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and our signature marketing e-course. Here are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Campbell and Katie Lemieux.
Hey there, Startup Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. We are delighted you're here and you caught us on the last recording of our mini-series called Tribulations to Thriving as a Therapist. And today we're going to hear from Patrick Casale. Patrick Casale. It was funny. I just asked him right before so I could say it properly, and man, I messed it up. But that's okay. He said that's okay. We're moving on. It is what it is. So it's Patrick Casale, not Sale. Anyways, and it's interesting because this whole mini-series was actually inspired by Patrick. So Patrick, if you guys have known him already, Patrick's very authentic and he shares kind of about his life and his stories and stuff like that. And Kate and I were like, wow, just really inspired by his authenticity. And we decided to create this whole mini series out of what we saw Patrick doing. And it's just really been a blessing. I know in the last two recordings today that we've had, I feel fulfilled and full from our guests. It's just really been amazing. And we're really excited to hear from Patrick. But we hope that you guys joined us yesterday as we interviewed Monica Pitek Fugetti, and Monica talks about her process through breast cancer and how she was very much attached to her identity with her hair. And so she talks about the journey, the vulnerability, the authenticity, and the lessons that she learned, but how she also impacts others now. So definitely check out that podcast if you have not already. So a little bit about Patrick. Patrick has created a group practice in Asheville, North Carolina, as well as private practice coaching and business building. He's also created a Facebook group for private practice therapists, currently at 3,000 therapists around the world. He loves playing soccer, spending time with his wife, Ariel, and his two dogs, Hudson and Hazel. He also loves rewatching New Girl and The Lord of the Rings on repeat obsessively. So before we say hello to Patrick officially, we hope that you guys enjoy this podcast if you're a loyal listener. And if you're brand new to us, what a great time to venture into being part of our community and our podcast. For our new members, we have a gift for you, and that is your private practice, your dream private practice playbook. And this is the exact methodology that Kate and I have used to actually create our six-figure private practices and help many therapists do the same. Head on over to privatepracticestartup.com, and right there on the homepage, you'll see a big, huge button. Go ahead and grab your playbook and enjoy. We are going to take a quick moment for our sponsors before we dive into Patrick's story. Therapy Notes. That's therapynotes.com. It's the highest rated electronic health record system that's specifically designed for behavioral health professionals. With over 1,000 verified reviews and an average customer rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com, Therapy Notes is the #1 rated EHR software that's proven to help automate your professional life. Billing, note-taking, scheduling, and telehealth have never been easier, with live telephone support available 7 days a week. So a real person can get you real answers really fast. Try Therapy Notes today with no strings attached. If you already use an EHR system, Therapy Notes can easily transfer your records safely and securely. Remember, telehealth is included completely free with every subscription. And there's always special discounts for nonprofits, students, and universities. Therapy Notes wants to personally thank you for making our world a safer space. Visit therapynotes.com and use promo code PPS, as in Private Practice Startup, to get 2 months free. That's promo code PPS. Hey there, Startup Nation listeners. We have an interesting fact for you. Did you know that 75% of people will judge your credibility based on your website design? In other words, if you've been putting off updating your private practice website, you could be driving away potential clients and missing out on that income. So today we want to talk to you about a company called Brighter Vision. Brighter Vision makes marketing simple for therapists, starting with a professional website that's specifically designed to attract your ideal clients and get them to contact you. All of their sites come with unlimited support and are fully optimized to rank well with search engines. They've even designed an automated blogging and social media platform specifically for mental health professionals. Best yet, we've worked with them to create an exclusive offer just for you. Get $10 off every single month for your entire first year on any new Brighter Vision website package. Plus, try out their new social media automation platform designed specifically for therapists for 3 full months completely free. That's a total savings of well over $200. To learn more and get started, head over to brightervision.com/try, TRY/startup. Again, that's brightervision.com/try/startup. Patrick, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you back.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been doing more and more of these this year, and it's been fun.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So before we hit record, we actually were talking about your dogs, but we're also, when we had you on the podcast before, you and I got to spend some time and really talking about like how you take 12 weeks of vacation a year, and you're about to head to Iceland. Amazing.
Going to Iceland, coming back for a day and a half, and then going to Yellowstone for 7 days feels a little much, but I felt like after surgery it was necessary.
So tell our listeners a little bit, because they might not know when you reference surgery, this is part of your story and your journey. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. About 6-7 months ago, I got diagnosed with a really rare throat disease called Zenker's diverticulitis. And it's kind of changed and rocked my world this year with like, you start to face your own mortality and the recognition and realization that life is so short. And, I went through different stages of this with grief and anger, like, why me? I'm too young for this, because the disease typically impacts people over 70. So I'm like, what is going on? And it will be something that's chronic that I'll have to deal with, throughout life. But there was a lot of buildup with sadness and anger and frustration and panic towards the surgery date. And Katie, you've been so supportive, and I appreciate it. But like, I'm glad to be on the other side of it for now. Had a lot of support in my life, like reaching out, making me broth, which I never want to eat again. Thanks everyone though, either way. And, it's just nice to be able to eat food and enjoy it now without choking on it, which is, food is big for me. Travel is big for me. And that felt like a major loss in my life for the last year and a half.
Yeah. Well, we're glad that you're on the other side too. And yeah, we've been in contact about your journey. I've kind of came on the tail end, but that's got to be really difficult, especially because I do see you post so much about food on Facebook, and I'm just so excited for you to enjoy the amazingness that you post. I remember I don't know if it was like a cookie or ice cream thing, and I'm like, holy, like sugar coma. Like it was funny. I'm not a big ice cream eater, but we actually just got ice cream, and it was like a medium size, and like I ate the whole thing because I was just like craving it. And I was like, my body was like shaking from sugar. I'm like, okay, this was not a good idea.
I will say I only ate like 2 bites of that particular ice cream dish. And then I was like, yep, I can't do this. I need to throw this in the garbage.
Yeah. Well, I hope you are soon enjoying much more foods that you love enjoying. So we're here to talk about today a little bit about a different part of your story. So where should we start with that?
So, when you asked me to come on here and talk about my story, the first thing that always comes into my mind is just my battle with gambling addiction. And that started really early on when I was probably 14 or 15 years old. I didn't identify it that way at the time, but looking back, it's like, wow, this was an issue from very early on. And that plagued me for almost 12 years of my life, where all throughout college, I didn't even go to class. I went to the casinos. I went to underground poker rooms. It started to spiral very, very, very quickly. And, at first, it was easy to kind of get by and pretend nothing was wrong. And my parents didn't know. I'd tell them like, I'd call my mom and say, hey, I need money to go on this skydiving trip with my dorm suite mates. And she'd be like, yeah, of course you can have $400 for that. And, very quickly the lies start to build up, and it really became, pure hell of like, you're living with this battle that is so destructive, but you can't stop. And it was just this constant obsessive process of like, it's ritualistic too, like I'd be sitting in class and I'd be like, if I get this test back and I score more than an 80, I can go to the casino. But if I score less than an 80, I won't go. I would have went either way. I would sometimes even flip a coin to do that. And I went to college about an hour south of Montreal in upstate New York. And there are 3 casinos that are all 18 plus in both Montreal and some native reservations up there. I would drive through blizzards to go, like no concern about safety or well-being, and be there for 12 to 20 hours at a time and like overdraw my bank account by thousands of dollars, and just would go, once you kind of snap out of it, you come to like this moment where you're like, what did I just do? And that addiction process kind of wears off, and you're like, how am I going to get this back? Like, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my bills or buy food even, or gas? I always made sure I had gas in my tank to get home, and I always made sure I had dog food for my dog, because I was like, it's not his fault that this is happening. And so many people that were involved in my life became distant in my life and estranged, because they would try to help. I would push them away. I would lie to them. I would manipulate them. I would steal from them. And that was probably the darkest, bleakest time in my life. You're driving home at 4 a.m. and you start to consider driving your car into oncoming traffic or a tree, or just like anything to make it stop. And I would just think like, if you would just win this amount of money, you would never do this again. But that was never the reality, because I won plenty of big amounts of money, large amounts of money, and I would just spend double that, and it would never be enough. And that process was just, it feels like insanity to look back at the things that I did and the things that I did to myself and to my family. And it was just so painful.
How did you get introduced into gambling at 14, and what were you doing then?
Yeah, so I remember early on, my mom would take me to play bingo when we would go camping, and I would win a lot of money very often, even at 8, 9 years old. And I started to think about what kind of creates this process. And, my dad, who is not really an emotionally available human being, never told me he was proud of me, never told me he loved me, but would slip $100 under my pillow when I was 8 and be like, you've got something in your room, you should go find it. I started to associate money with self-worth and love. And I became obsessive over that. I have to get more, I have to win more, I have to figure this out. So at 14, it was more like poker games with friends. And I noticed to myself, I was always the person who wanted to play for more money. We'd do a friendly $10 game, and I'm like, why don't we do 100? And the game would be over, and I'm like, let's play another one. And all the telltale signs of someone who can't control or manage or moderate their gambling. And as I got my driver's license, I started to drive to a casino that was about 4 hours away after playing poker all night with my friends. And it was $100. It felt innocent. You win some, you lose some. But the desire to go back just continued to strengthen and intensify. And, fast forward to college, my best friend ended up committing suicide in my dorm room my freshman year. And after that, college didn't matter. I don't even know how I got out of it and passed and graduated, because I just didn't care anymore. I just, some people would have turned to drugs or alcohol to deal with the trauma and the pain, and gambling was escapism for me. I just didn't have to think about anything when I was in the casino or playing poker. I still remember playing poker till 7 a.m. with friends and then having to go on a school trip to Dannemora maximum security prison at 8 a.m. And I fell asleep in a group full of inmates. And one of the inmates tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "This isn't the place where you want to fall asleep, man." And I was just like, this is just becoming so unmanageable. This is scary.
So thank you for sharing that. And when you shared that you were going on a school trip to a prison, that just kind of like caught me off guard. Like that's not usually a trip that I would think that a school is taking, students on. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I was a criminal justice major at the time. And
now it makes sense.
There's a lot of prisons in upstate New York because there's nothing else there. And, I'm very happy that my life didn't go down that path to become a police officer or anything in law enforcement, but that was my trajectory at the time.
So Patrick,
I was just going to say, addiction is such a slippery slope. And I'm wondering, Patrick, well, first off, thank you so much for sharing your story so openly. And I'm just wondering, when did you start to really realize that it was becoming a big problem and snowballing like this?
I went to Ireland with my family when I was 18, and our first day in Dublin, I left the hotel, didn't tell my dad or my stepmom where I was going, and walked 4 miles to a casino in Dublin. I only had 100 euros. I spent it very quickly. I ended up walking back, and my dad was unbelievably panicked. He had thought I got kidnapped or something had happened, and I was like, I don't remember what I made up. I was just like, I was just walking around the city. And then probably a week later, we were in Galway, Ireland, and I did the same thing. I left the hotel at like 9 o'clock at night, took a cab to a casino that I had found. I paid the cab fare, I had like 80 euros left. I never even considered like, how do I get home if I lose this money? Like, I don't even know where I am. I ended up winning like $10,000 that night. And the guy could have killed me. Like the hotel or the casino is the size of the room that I'm in right now. And he had to go to his safe to give me the money. And I just remember taking a cab back, and the thrill was like something I had never experienced before in my life. And we got back to the States a couple days later, and I immediately drove to Montreal and spent $20,000. And it was just like, oh my God, like this is bad. Like, that is when life just becomes unmanageable. Like you don't have gas in your gas tank. You don't have food at home, and you can't eat. I was bartending at the time, so it was always cash, and I would steal from the register to pay these debts back. I got in with a bookie and was doing sports betting and owed him money. He was showing up at my fraternity house. Like he told me one day to like get in the car with him, and I'm like, I'm going to die. This is how this is going to end right here. Thankfully, that was not the case. I saw therapists. I did addiction IOPs, but they were so specific to substance use that it never really landed for me, because it always feels like gambling is like the black sheep of addiction in a way, because it's legal and it's not a substance, and people really struggle to conceptualize, like, why can't you just stop? And I heard that all the time from friends and family members, like, why can't you just stop doing this? And that's when you realize, like, this is an addiction. I know how destructive this is, and I can't stop it. And, I moved back home after graduation. My dad bailed me out endlessly. It was super enabling at the time, but I know he was just doing what he thought was best. I started going to Gamblers Anonymous for about 2 years. I never really took it seriously. I kind of don't prescribe to the 12-step mentality, so it was really hard to like turn myself over to a higher power. I could admit that I was powerless and that I had caused destruction, but that was about it. I just remember answering yes to all 20 questions that they asked me at the first meeting that I went to about my gambling, and being like, yeah, I'm probably in the right place for now. And I maintained sobriety for about 2 years. Even though I was kind of white knuckling through it, I wasn't actually working on it. And then I had a bad breakup with someone I was engaged to throughout college, and I just went right back to it. Like, I was working selling cars in upstate New York. I did not enjoy my life at that time, and it was just easy. I found an underground poker room, and I went every single night. I decided that I was going to move to Asheville very impulsively. I had about $30,000 in cash that I gave my dad and told him to hide it somewhere in his house. And I found it, and I would take money out of it and go play poker every night. On the way to Asheville, I stopped at a casino in Pennsylvania and gambled for like 15 hours with my dog in the car. And I spent every dollar I had. And instead of moving down here with security, I moved down here like in desperation. And it was just so hard to break that. And that was back in 2011.
And so for you, Patrick, what's kind of been helpful for your journey? Like you say, you don't really ascribe to kind of like the 12-step, and you've been to some therapists, but you just really didn't an IOP, and that just wasn't the right place for you. What was helpful throughout your journey? And was it more of kind of like up and down? I know that you said you had a 2-year period of sobriety, or was it more like a snowball effect and just kind of kept going down until you started getting help? And then did it go up? Share with us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. You know, during abstinence, you can start to see pieces of the puzzle come together, and you're like, okay, I can have a bank account again. Like, I can buy food for myself when I want to. And you start to realize, I don't know what the shift is for people when they go from, I'm trying to recover and abstain for everybody else, like my fiance, my parents, whatever. It was never for me. I don't remember what the shift was, but I do remember sitting in my apartment in Asheville with like $200 to my name and driving to the casino in Cherokee and spending it in like a matter of seconds. And I remember on the drive home just thinking, I can't do this to myself anymore. You know, I just cannot continue to hit rock bottom over and over and over again. And that was my like epiphany light bulb moment. And I have never gambled since that time. And that was June of 2012.
And did you just stop and that was that?
Yeah, weirdly, that was that. I think you're just going through this battle in your head all the time. And, you know, I think it's about having support systems, even if you've pushed them away, they exist. And also just knowing and understanding the mental health community. My mom's a social worker, and it's always been a part of my life. So just finding a therapist that I could build rapport with. I found a job here immediately after in a helping profession with the homeless population. So to start to see people who are really out of luck and destitute and marginalized, and to recognize I was just like razor thin from going into that place, it was just helpful how everything came together simultaneously after I stopped gambling.
And did you get back into therapy? Did you not?
Yeah, I've been in therapy, you know, most of my life, and ever since that time consistently. And I started working with someone who specialized in process addiction, and that just felt so much more useful to me than someone who's like, yeah, I understand cocaine and heroin and opiate addiction, but that never landed for me. So to have someone who truly specialized in gambling and process, that was very, very useful. And to also understand that I wasn't alone in the situation, that, you know, people do struggle with this, even though when you're in it, you feel like it's very much a unique scenario and situation.
Patrick, I'm not familiar with the term process addiction.
Yeah, so process addictions are kind of like gambling, sex addiction, food addiction, gaming addiction, essentially. So it's all about the process, right? Like the addiction isn't actually the gambling or the act of gambling, but the build up towards the gambling. So the process of like the ritual, the obsession. Hell, when I was like driving to the casino, I would start thinking, whatever my mileage is on, whatever number I see is what I'm going to play on roulette as soon as I walk in the door. It's crazy, but it was really about the process. And I could feel that, you know, the intensification of the anxiety, the almost like the exhilaration too. And that all of those chemicals are pumping through your body. And then you make the first bet and that all goes away. So it's just one of those pieces that was the exciting part.
Yeah, I've never heard it that way, but I've even heard like heroin addicts talk about that, like preparing the needle, like they haven't taken the drug, but it's like the excitement, the anticipation for it. So that makes sense. So share with us a little bit about where your journey has gone from since, I think you said 2012.
Yeah, so I started working as a case manager with the homeless population in Western North Carolina. And I just started thinking like, I'm making $13 an hour with a bachelor's degree. This is about it for me right now. Like, I don't know what else I'm going to do. So I started thinking about grad school for mental health counseling, and I explored some options. I was really concerned that my GPA was going to be prohibitive and be negatively impactful. And I ended up finding a master's in clinical mental health counseling program here in Asheville that had just started like a pilot evening program. So I had to work 40 hours a week and go to school at night. And, I just loved the classes. And they didn't feel like work or school like my undergrad did, where one of my classes was Introduction to Canada. But like, I really enjoyed the coursework, and I enjoyed being able to incorporate the skills I was learning in grad school and into the work as a case manager. And, I ended up doing an internship at an opioid replacement clinic or a methadone clinic. And that was very eye-opening to me, having to be at work at 4 a.m. and having a caseload of 75 people and most of that time being spent doing like observed drug screens with people. It just didn't feel like counseling, but I felt like it was necessary for me to be like, people are struggling in so many different ways. And there's always a question that comes up in addiction counseling. Like, your clients want to know if you understand their struggle. They always ask. I don't get this anymore with my mental health clients, but my clients who struggle with addiction always ask you, like, do you understand what it's like to be in this headspace or to be in this place? And I will say this very directly and authentically, like, yes, I do. I won't go into very in-depth details of my story, but I want them to know that I do understand. And, that has taken me through, agency job after agency job. I always found myself in middle management. I'm pretty good at leading people, but I'm really bad at being an employee because, like, I hate taking direction and I struggle with, like, things that don't make sense to me. So, I was working at a walk-in, like, crisis unit here that got established in Asheville, and I believed in the mission, like walk-in 24-hour crisis services. We had nurses, peer supports, psychiatric services, clinicians. I just couldn't deal with the bureaucracy. And I started thinking, what else is out there other than this? And I would think about private practice. My mom was in private practice, and I was like, I don't think I can do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't even know where to begin. But I know this can't be it for me because I'm just not able to do this. I value like freedom and autonomy way too much. And it took a lot of courage to build up the decision to like put my notice in and try to go out on my own. My wife was super supportive and always has been. And I talked with other therapists in the area about their journeys in private practice. I started to say like, wait, you make how much money and you only work 20 hours a week? What? That's not possible. And I started one at night just to get a feel for it. And then I got clients pretty quickly. And I started taking PTO to go network with other therapists in town. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put my notice in. I talked myself out of it many times. And then finally, the breaking point for me was like everyone at my agency got a raise, and they were notorious for not giving raises. They like prided themselves on that. But they didn't give me one because I helped start a new program. And they were like, you haven't had a 6-month review yet, so you're not entitled to this raise. And I was like, yep, that's it for me. I'm done with this. Like, I'm not being taken for granted or underappreciated anymore. So I put my notice in that day. Of course, I gave a 90-day notice, which was outrageous.
What made you give a 90-day?
I don't know. I think I felt overly responsible for the staff I was supervising. And, you have this guilt or like bleeding heart syndrome of I've got to be there or they won't be successful. They won't be taken care of. They hired my replacement in 2 days. So like I spent the next almost 3 months doing nothing essentially and like counting down the days to leave. I actually ended up cutting it short halfway through and just letting them know I was done.
I hoped you took that time and worked on your practice. Just saying. So Patrick, based off, your life and your story and the things that you've gone through, what is it how are you impacting others today? And where does that come out? Does that come out in your work, your personal, both?
I think both. I've always been someone who wants to talk about struggle because I think we so often sweep it under the rug, or there's so much shame and stigma still to addiction and mental health recovery in this country. And I've always just tried really hard to let other people know that they're not alone in this. Like, it's very common for us to struggle with these things. And I think we get drawn to the helping profession for certain reasons. And, through private practice, certainly trying really hard to be as empathetic as possible with people and meeting people where they're at and not dictating treatment based on what I think should be the path. But now that I've moved into group practice ownership and private practice coaching, I try really hard to lead by example and not ask people to do things I haven't done. I use a lot of my coaching based on mistakes that I've made. And I also really promote authenticity because I think authenticity is what's relatable, especially when selling and marketing relational-based work. So I've tried really hard to really promote that with coaching clients to say, like, you can disclose a little bit. You can be you. Like, you can let your personality shine because that's what's going to attract people to you. And I've learned that along the way because I think that for me, that's always been a value that I have, and I have to live by that. I really struggle with artificiality, which has certainly been a struggle for me to step into coaching and into that world with so many people who don't always feel authentic to me or genuine.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate what you're doing, and we really appreciate you sharing your stories even on Facebook and in the public and being authentic, because it really does liberate others to do the same most often. I mean, they have a choice, but by you sharing, it's, I'm sure you get a lot of like DMs on the back of just like reaching out. And I know how important that is. So we really appreciate that. And I know that from what I've been hearing, Kate, and I'm sure you can hear the same, is like there's this common thread between, the pain that people have went through and really making that passion and purpose and really being authentic about it, and pulling down, moving aside the curtain, pulling down the walls and just sharing authentically. And I just noticed that as a common thread through all of our guests on this miniseries for sure. Patrick, what do you want people most to take away from your message today?
I really think that the human spirit is really resilient. And even in the darkest of times, they don't last forever. And it is possible to come out the other side of it. There was never a part of my life before 2012 where I thought any of this was possible. Like a master's degree, owning a home, being married for 7 years, like owning businesses. This wasn't even a thought. Like it couldn't be. And once you start to work on yourself, whether it be your mental health, your substance use, whatever the case may be, and actually take it seriously, at first it might feel like you're not making progress or you want it to go quicker. But I always tell people, like, you spent 15 years of your life destroying everything, and it's going to take time to build back up. So I just want people to know that this stuff is possible and that people do recover and that mental health and addiction therapy works and that you can be successful working for yourself. And I believe that the more authentic, the better. And I think that we have to really understand what brought us into this field to be able to support others, but we also have to do our own work, or otherwise we're just promoting our own agenda or really having bad boundaries with clients as well.
Yeah, Patrick, thank you so much for sharing your story so openly. And it's clear that you've been through a lot, you've overcome a lot, you've done a lot of work on yourself, and that's inspired you to really help others to pursue their own passions and overcome their own struggles. I'm curious, when did you start to be so open about your own struggles with gambling addiction? I know you hit on the stigma and the shame that's still a part of our lives today. So I'm just curious when you started to be so open and share this aspect of your life with others.
That's a good question. I think it was maybe right towards the end of my college career, which was 2008, because so many people around me knew something was off. I would sit in my fraternity house by myself in my room while people were partying, or I would play poker all night. I wasn't interested in socializing. So then I started to talk to people about this, and I just started to talk about the fact that you're not alone in this. Even though I'm struggling, I recognize so many other people were as well, and I've always felt very in tune and empathic with people who were suffering. And I just knew that if I felt like I could help other people, that maybe this could be possible for myself eventually down the road, even though I didn't see it. So I just started writing about it. That's always been a really good creative outlet for me, to be able to write and put things out to the world. And I'd get a lot of comments from people like my mom and other people who are like, don't share this stuff. Like, why are you talking about this? And I'm like, well, because the more we talk about it, the less power it has over us. And I believe in that to this day. So I want to try really hard. I'm writing a book on gambling addiction and recovery through it. And I just want people to know that it's okay to talk about the suffering, and that by doing so, you're taking the power away from something that kind of dictates your life and how you move forward through it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing.
And definitely let us know when your book gets published so we can add that to the show notes page of this episode. That's really exciting. Thank you again so much, Patrick, for being here with us today and really inspiring this podcast mini-series. It's just been, like I've said in each one, it's just been a true honor and delight to really hold space and be witness and just hear people's stories of what they've done and what they've overcome, and really the authenticity and the vulnerability that they share to really it's almost like it, in the beginning, it moves you forward, but then it's like you keep doing that to help others move forward. So we greatly appreciate that.
Thank you very much for having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Startup Nation, we hope you enjoyed this episode with Patrick, and then also this whole series from Tribulations to Thriving in Private Practice. And I know we've really been touched by all of the stories and what these amazing clinicians have overcome in their lives, both personally and professionally, and how they're making such great impacts in the world. And really, they're each a force to be reckoned with. It's just amazing. So we hope you all enjoyed them. And we want to encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review our show. We always love hearing your feedback and how the show is impacting your life and your private practice, just to ensure that we're giving you exactly what you want content-wise, because we really want to support you along the journey from startup to mastery. So we will see you on the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.